by demerarawaves.com.
Good day with your major newscast. I am Jessica Daw. First with the highlights. The Guyana Defense Force says fewer soldiers are deserting the army. A probe is ongoing into the fire at the Leparcan Bond on Lombard Street, Georgetown. In the region, in Barbados, High Court papers have been filed to stop tomorrow's general elections because of the COVID pandemic. The Bahamas government is coming under fire for hefty spending on a trip to Dubai by a delegation of at least 150 persons. And internationally, we have the latest bulletin of world news from the BBC.
Advertise with us on News Talk Radio Guyana 103.1 FM for best coverage on programs on motivation, beauty and health, parenting and relationships, knowing your rights, and a variety of enlightening content, and get value for your money. Call our helpful staff today on 223-1056 or 223-1041 today.
Now for the news in detail. The Guyana Court of Appeal on Tuesday granted leave to the government and the People's Progressive Party to appeal a decision to the Caribbean Court of Justice (CCJ). Chancellor of the Judiciary Yonette Cummings made her decision in keeping with the CCJ Act, and she also ordered that the applicants or intended appellants lodge $750,000 Guyana dollars with the Supreme Court as security for costs within 90 days from Tuesday. They also have to provide within 90 days a list of the documents to be provided in the appeal. The Guyana Court of Appeal also ordered that its decision on December 21 be stayed until the CCJ hears and determines the matter. That decision had been that the Court of Appeal could hear an appeal on why the High Court dismissed an opposition APNU plus AFC election petition. The High Court had refused to hear it on a technicality because the representative of the list of candidates, David Granger, had not signed certain documents within the legal mandated period. Attorney at law Roysdale Ford, before Tuesday's decision, failed to convince the court that the substantive appeal should have been first heard by the Guyana Court of Appeal before moving to the CCJ. Attorney at law Douglas Mendez for the PPP's representative of list of candidates, Barra Jagdeo, told the Chancellor and other justices of appeal that his client has a right to a CCJ appeal because the matter touches on a constitutional matter, and this court ought to find that this is a matter of great and general public importance. If the petition is ultimately heard, it could see a detailed examination of evidence related to allegations by both APNU plus AFC and the PPP of fraud that could have changed the outcome of the March 2, 2020 general and regional elections. The Guyana Fire Service is still trying to ascertain the cause of the fire that early yesterday morning destroyed the Leparcan Bond on Lombard Street. No one was injured. Fire Chief Gregory Wickham says firefighters received the call at about 11:43 Sunday night, and when they arrived on the scene, they saw the blaze emanating from the northeast section of the bond. Mr. Wickham says there was sufficient water.
A call was made for other appliances to attend to the fire, and that was done. We had 6 appliances on the ground. Also, we had the fireboat, the protector, supplying water from the river. And so we had copious amount of water to deal with the fire, and we managed to bring it under control and stop it from spreading to other nearby buildings and exposure, for example, like vehicles and so. Even while we were doing firefighting, we had explosions, but there were some gas cylinders stored in the area for these forklifts.
Fire Chief Gregory Wickham. The Guyana Fire Service says the structure involved was a 2-story wooden, concrete, and steel building owned by Guyana National Industrial Company Incorporated and used as shipping companies, namely Tropical Shipping Company and the Parkin Trading Company. As a result of the fire, Tropical Shipping Company sustained water damage and minor fire damage. Additionally, propane cylinders, a quantity of barrels containing foodstuff, clothing, household appliances, and other items were destroyed. Meanwhile, the Parkin Trading Company suffered the loss of one Bobcat machine, a quantity of office furniture, gas cylinders, crates of energy drinks, 3 40-feet containers containing electrical cables and flex hoses, 3 electrical transformers, and 3 40-feet refrigeration containers. 11 vehicles were also destroyed, while 5 were severely damaged. The 3 others were slightly damaged. The Guyana Defense Force, GDF, says that fewer soldiers are deserting the military organization. Appearing before the Public Accounts Committee, PAC, Commander Vernon Burnett was at the time responding to questions about how 171 soldiers deserted the GDF in 2017. They had been part of the 406 soldiers who had been struck off strength. Mr. Burnett says in a number of instances the kit and equipment had not been accounted for, and in other instances they had left them in the cupboards. Commander Barnett says reasons for soldiers walking off the job include not being able to cope with the military discipline or they get better paying jobs. However, he says there were no deserters in 2018. The GDF's accounting officer says that the Welfare Department has since been expanded, with more welfare officers being assigned to units and subunits.
What the leadership of the force has done, though, I know that in the past we have recognized 2017 and even beyond the large number of soldiers who were going absent, and there were some intervention at defense headquarters level and at the imploring upon commanding officers to have regular sessions and seek to have intervention at that level. Welfare, they have been bringing to the leadership issues that needed to be looked at, and maybe with the expansion of that department, just maybe that could have been of help.
Meanwhile, Commander Barnett says the system of accountability for military kit and equipment has since been improved. An investigation has been launched into the death of 4 children from COVID-19. Health Minister Dr. Frank Anthony says a team of doctors has been assembled to conduct the probe.
For at least 4 of these cases, the circumstances where the child died before coming to the hospital, we need to get some more details. So that's something that is ongoing. Within the ministry, we have a small committee of doctors who are going to get these charts and review them more thoroughly and do some interviews with the family of these children. So hopefully that will give us a better understanding of what is happening.
The Health Ministry says 892 persons have been tested positive with COVID-19 within the past 24 hours. Of the 158 persons who are hospitalized, 15 are very sick and are receiving intensive care. Doctors have asked 11,196 persons to isolate themselves at home to reduce the chance of spreading the virus. 4 other persons have been quarantined to see if they will develop symptoms of the COVID-19 virus. The death toll has risen to 1,096 with the passing of an 87-year-old man on Monday. Police say they are searching for 3 males who allegedly invaded the home of a family at Blueberry Hill, Wismar Linden, and robbed them of several items. They told police that the bandits carted off 3 cellular phones and gold jewelry with a total value of $400,000. The men allegedly pounced on the family and held them at gunpoint at about 8:15 Sunday night. As they were escaping, a male cousin, Corwin Sampson, was returning his cousin's motorcycle, which he had borrowed earlier. Mr. Sampson told police that one of the men shot him to his left knee before stealing his jewelry worth $25,000. Mr. Sampson has been admitted to the Linden Hospital. A woman has been arrested after she allegedly pelted her brother with bottles. A man who also stabbed him has also been arrested. Police identified the injured man as a 25-year-old Viraj Singh, a taxi driver of Scottsburg, Carriverton, Berbice. Police say he is hospitalized and his condition is listed as serious. The incident occurred at about 7:45 Sunday night. Those arrested are Jashoda Singh, also known as Devya, and Rajendra Bhagrati of number 58 Village Quarantine. Police say that Virat Singh and his sister had an altercation because she allegedly threatened her mother earlier in the day. He alleges that when he upbraided her, she started to pelt him with bottles, and he retaliated by picking up a mop stick, which led to a fight between them. Mr. Bhagrati attacked Viraj with a knife, which caused him to sustain injuries. Police say his condition is serious. Tributes are continuing to pour in for Guyanese business magnate Yesu Prasad. He died early yesterday morning at the age of 93. President Irfan Ali says Guyana has lost an outstanding soul and a true son of the soil. The Private Sector Commission, PSC, of which Mr. Prasad is its founding chairman, says the business community is grateful for the astute and wise leadership he provided in the early days during the return of democracy to Guyana. The PSC also credited him for his role in the birth of the Private Sector Commission. In the area of micro and small business development, the Institute of Private Enterprise, IPED, says that it was Mr. Prasad who had established that institution to assist in business development. IPED says that Mr. Prasad has left behind a sustainable organization and with a network of almost 5,000 small and micro enterprises that are themselves sustainable. The University of Guyana School of Medicine says Mr. Prasad was one of the school's greatest benefactors. The medical school says his legacy will live on in the achievements of all those whose lives he touched, not least current and further generations of UG's School of Medicine graduates. Now for the news in the region. In Barbados, a politician has moved to the High Court to stop tomorrow's general election because the Elections and Boundaries Commission says COVID-19 positive persons will not be allowed to vote. Details in this report from Barbados today.
An injunction has been filed before the High Court seeking to have Wednesday's general election called off. Philip Kitlin of the Barbados Sovereignty Party said it was unreasonable to allow an election in the midst of a pandemic. He's arguing that President Dame Sandra Mason unreasonably exercised her discretionary powers by accepting Prime Minister Mia Mottley's election call on December 27th. He also claims that the exclusion of more than 5,000 COVID-19 positive citizens from the election breaches Section 6 of the Representation of the People Act, which enshrines the right of eligible residents and citizens to vote. Kitlin is being represented by human rights attorney Lalo Hanneman.
But I see this as a fundamental human rights issue. People have been dying for years for the right to vote, fighting, in South Africa, in Palestine, all over the world. Right here in the Caribbean, people have been fighting for universal adult suffrage. And we can't just allow it to be taken away and do nothing about it. So it's from the human rights perspective that I've got involved. Something like 5,000 electors will be deprived of the right to vote. And of course, a lot of those electors live in various constituencies around St. Michael because of the fact people are living in crowded conditions and traveling on ZRs and so on. So those constituencies will be heavily impacted in terms of electors not being able to vote because it means that, quite often there's a majority of a matter of a couple hundred in between the winner and the loser. And 5,000 people not being allowed to vote could obviously make a huge difference. So we're also saying that elections wouldn't be free and fair because people are deprived of the right to vote and also because the results won't reflect the reality because people haven't been able to attend the polling stations.
Attorney at Law Lalu Hanuman ending that report from Barbados today. Meanwhile, Barbados' opposition leader says that the incumbent Prime Minister Mia Mottley has gone silent on possible disenfranchisement of thousands of Barbadians. The Bahamian government is defending its decision to spend a hefty amount of money for the Bahamian delegation in Dubai for the Expo 2020. The Bahamian government has spent $1 million for the Bahamas Pavilion and a Bahamian presence in Dubai. The private sector is contributing $500,000, while the United Arab Emirates has spent $3.5 million on the Bahamian trip, with the United Arab Emirates covering the cost of Prime Minister Philip Davis's delegation. This report from Our News Bahamas.
Deputy Prime Minister Chester Cooper defending government's commitment to ensuring the Bahamas was well represented during Bahamas Day at the World Expo in Dubai. With a delegation of over 150 Bahamians in the United Arab Emirates, critics have questioned the choice of entertainers and exactly how taxpayers' money was spent.
We found that the former administration did not bring much focus to international relations. We are pressing forward abroad.
Cooper says he stands on statements made by the Office of the Prime Minister that the Bahamas' delegation to Dubai for World Expo 2020 was a justified investment. Government has been criticized over who was selected to go and why. From performers like Gospel Choir Shabbat, led by OPM Press Secretary Clint Watson, to Dynamite Daisy.
I think they're going to be paid for every people call them.
While the government explained in a statement that the United Arab Emirates gave $3.5 million to the Bahamas for the venture, $500,000 from the private sector, and up to $1 million from government, the criticism was relentless. Still, Cooper insists it's about rebuilding the international relationships that may have been lost over the last 4 years.
We are building diplomatic relations with the UAE as well, and therefore it is important that we have a proper showing in Dubai, and it's important that our standing in the world is regained, and I am delighted that our Prime Minister is leading the way in doing just that.
Over the weekend, reaction from here at home heating up.
Something is sitting well with me. And I got to talk with this. Got to talk with this.
DJ Pencil, one of several in the entertainment industry, voicing concerns over the selection process of performers on the trip.
My point is, they send who they want to send. Fine, I ain't got no problem with that, right? But it's Curry, if you ever have to stop.
That report from our News Bahamas. Antigua and Barbados Commissioner of Police Atlee Rodney had a stern word for home and property owners who he believes are not taking sufficient preventative measures against theft on their compounds. He noted that there has been a sustained rise in theft for the year 2021. The police commissioner says that this sort of crime continued to dominate the criminal statistics, accounting for 57% of the crimes committed last year. The highest figures came from breaking and larceny, 24%, and larceny, 33%. These same crimes accounted for 59% of reports in 2020. Mr. Rodney blamed homeowners and businesses for negligence, saying after 2 years of advocating, they were still not adhering to crime prevention tips. And lastly, in the region, Jamaica has recorded 2 consecutive weeks of 30-plus murders since the start of the year, bringing the homicide tally to 72 as at January 15. The Jamaica Gleaner reports that for the corresponding period in 2021, 58 murders were recorded. According to the latest statistics from the Jamaica Constabulary Force, 35 Jamaicans were murdered last week. This represents a 24% increase year on year. For the first week of 2022, the JCF said 37 murders were committed. Additionally, 35 persons have been injured in shootings since the start of the year. For the corresponding period in 2021, 48 persons were shot and injured. Other serious crimes like rape and break-ins have recorded a decrease. Here now is your international news coming from the BBC.
Montgomery. NATO has warned Russia that any military attack on Ukraine would come at a high cost. The NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg said the alliance would provide support for Ukraine and help it to uphold its right to self-defense. But he said NATO did not pose a threat.
The risk of a conflict is real. NATO allies call on Russia to de-escalate. NATO is a defensive alliance which does not threaten Russia or any other country. NATO allies are ready to engage and listen to concerns Russia may have, but we will not compromise on core principles.
Mr. Stoltenberg also warned Moscow that any use of force would lead to economic, financial and political sanctions. Russia denies that its current build-up of troops is a prelude to an invasion. It's demanded guarantees Ukraine will never join NATO. The government in Tonga says some of the country's smaller, less populated islands were severely damaged by Saturday's volcanic eruption and tsunami. On one island, all the houses were destroyed. On another, just 2 remain standing. Kazakhstan's former longtime president Nursultan Nazarbayev has downplayed the existence of any conflict or confrontation with his handpicked successor. It was his first appearance since more than 200 people were killed in unrest earlier this month. Olga Ivshina reports.
The anti-government protests which erupted in Kazakhstan earlier this month took many by surprise. How quickly they spread and became violent was shocking. If the initial impulse of the protests was attributed to a rise in fuel prices, the later violent stage was a sign of a deep power struggle. Analysts believe that the ex-president's appearance is a sign that the negotiations over the safe exit of Mr. Nazarbayev are now complete and he will gradually divest from his holdings. Mr. Nazarbayev has been a key power player in Kazakhstan for nearly 40 years.
Indonesia's parliament has approved the building of a new capital city in the island of Borneo. The move was proposed because the current capital, Jakarta, is plagued by air pollution and flooding. Rebecca Henschke is the BBC's former Indonesia correspondent.
I visited the area in East Kalimantan where they're hoping to build this, and it's incredibly remote. We had to travel by speedboat and then on very bumpy dirt roads to reach an area that's now a plantation in the middle of jungles. I went there with the planning minister at the time, and we stood there in this empty space, and he pointed out where he envisaged the presidential palace being. So an incredible task to pull off, and the Indonesian government is saying that in just 2 years' time, they want to see the relocation actually happen.
World News from the BBC. The Israeli police have denied media allegations that they have used phone hacking spyware to track civilian activists without court orders. An Israeli newspaper, Calculus, says its investigation revealed that the practice has been going on for many years. It said Pegasus spyware had been regularly used on opponents of the former Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Nigeria's Interior Minister has ordered prison guards across the country to shoot and kill anyone who attempts a jailbreak. Over the last year, armed groups have attacked various correctional facilities, enabling more than 5,000 inmates to escape. The British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has rejected allegations by his former top advisor Dominic Cummings that he lied to Parliament last week about a party held at his official residence during a coronavirus lockdown. Mr Johnson categorically denied he was warned that the gathering in the garden of 10 Downing Street was against the rules. Mr Johnson is facing pressure to resign over alcohol-fuelled events held when lockdowns were in force. The English cricket authorities have launched an investigation after police had to break up a drinking session involving players from England and Australia following their final match in Tasmania. They were all staying at the same hotel in Hobart. Here's Charlotte Gallagher.
A video posted on social media shows some of cricket's best-known faces being moved on by police. The England captain Joe Root, his teammate James Anderson, and the Australian trio Nathan Lyon, Alex Carey and Travis Head. It was just after 6 a.m, but some are still dressed in their playing whites, hours after the Ashes concluded on Sunday. One of the officers can be heard telling players, "You're too loud. You've obviously been asked to pack up and time for bed," with the cricketers then leaving, looking a bit sheepish.
BBC News.
And that was your international news from the BBC. Here now is a recap of the highlights. The Guyana Defence Force says a few US soldiers are deserting the army. A probe is ongoing into the fire at the Le Parc and Bond on Lombard Street, Georgetown. In the region, in Barbados, High Court papers have been filed to stop tomorrow's general elections because of the COVID pandemic. The Bahamas government is coming under fire for hefty spending on a trip to Dubai by a delegation of at least 150 persons. And internationally, you had the latest bulletin of world news from the BBC. And that was your major newscast. I am Jessica Daw.
This has been the news, compiled in the News Talk Radio newsroom. For ongoing updates, visit demerarawaves.com, and you can check facebook.com/demwaves and twitter.com/demwaves.